Greetings from New York City and Columbia Business School Executive Education. I'm Scott Gardner and I'm here today with Hylke Faber for the Unlearn Fear to Increase Your Leadership Depth webinar. Before I introduce Hylke, I'd like to go over a few quick logistics. So if you look at your screen, a recording of this webinar will be emailed to you. If you'd like to tweet about this webinar, please do so at #CBSExecEd. As always, we'd love you to submit those questions to the Q&A box throughout the webinar, and Hylke and I will get to as many of those as possible in the last 10 minutes. And one final logistical item, we'll be conducting a poll about halfway through the webinar, so be prepared for that. It's my pleasure to introduce Hylke Faber. He has a Bachelor in Business Administration from the Netherlands Business School and a Master's in International Relations from Johns Hopkins University. He is a coach and facilitator and leads the coaching organizations Constancy, the Growth Leaders Network, and the Crocodile School. He leads the Leader as Coach online program at the Columbia Business School Executive Education, and his recent award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles, Unlearn Fear and Become a True Leader, was selected by Bloomberg as one of the 10 best books on leadership in 2018. Hylke, it's great to be with you today.
It's good to be with you too, Scott.
Now, I'm going to rejoin you for the last 10 minutes for the Q&A, but before I do, I'd like to ask you one quick question. What makes you passionate about leadership depth?
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. So what makes me passionate about leadership depth is it's been a question, this idea of like what is true, what's really going on, has been going on with me for as long as I can remember. I was born on a farm in the north of the Netherlands, and I remember looking out over the fields and wondering what makes nature so beautiful? Why is this in so perfect harmony? What's going on? And I started to become more and more curious about these kinds of questions, which eventually led me to questions like, what would be really loving right now? And what would be really compassionate and wise right now? And I realized that asking these questions was not only interesting to me, but also important for leadership and for life. So what is leadership depth and why is it important? So think about this. Einstein said, problems cannot be resolved from the same level of consciousness that create the problem. So Einstein talks about some kind of relationship between problems and consciousness. So Einstein says something about the kind of thinking, the kind of consciousness, feelings, worldview we bring to our challenges has an impact on how we respond to these challenges. So why have leadership depth? Why bring greater consciousness to our challenges? Because we might become more effective and maybe feel less stressed out in the process. So then, how do we increase leadership depth? How do we do this? Well, in one very simple word, it's practice. And it's practice one moment and one problem at a time. Actually, you know, life is our greatest teacher. Well, problems can be great, you could say, weights in a gym that we can lift up to build this depth muscle. So what I'd like you to do, so to not make this theoretical, let's make this experiential. And I'd like you to think about a challenge that you're facing right now. And this challenge might be VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And when I think about it, most of our problems and challenges are like that, aren't they? Like, we need to have a difficult conversation with somebody. Which way shall I do this? I want to change the culture of my company. I want to figure out how I work better with my team. I need to let somebody go. We want to increase our marketing effectiveness. We want to change this technology. I want to find a way to feel less stressed out at work and maybe find a way to balance all the different priorities I have with family, work, and community, and whatever else might be going on. So we all have a plethora of challenges. So what I'd like you to do now is pick just one that's present for you right now. Pick one VUCA challenge that is present for you right now. And the one that I will practice on today with you is this one. I need to give a partner in one of my projects some feedback, and I'm not quite satisfied with his performance. So that's the challenge that I have. So now the question is, how do I bring leadership depth to this question? Well, to create depth, I have to start looking inside of me. And when I look inside of me, I might notice, when I look deeply, like some still, quiet wisdom that wants me to be patient, quiet, peaceful, compassionate, creative, caring, maybe even loving. And we can call all that our owl consciousness, our owl values. In neuroscience, you could say it has to do with our prefrontal cortices, our logical thinking, and also with our heart, like the tallness inside of us. And then there is also this cacophony of other voices inside of us. So notice that within yourself. There might be all kinds of other voices inside of us, which we can call our crocodiles. And we've actually called it our crocodilian fears, our crocodilian fears, because a lot of that thinking, if you really become discerning about it, we notice has some quality of worry about it, that it's like reactive. And this makes sense because our nervous system primarily is designed for one thing, which is what? You guessed it. It's survival. And it's not only physical survival, it's also emotional survival. So it's about like my little me, my little ego. Like I want to be a nice person. I want to be a good person. I want to be a competent person. I want to be a funny person. I want to be liked. Please, somebody tell me how good I am. Of course, underneath is the fear that I'm not good enough. And any of these egoic personalities get, you could say, challenged. And our crocodile tries to do its utmost best to protect our ego. Ergo, we have a lot of thinking going on all day, basically with one interest, to protect my emotional integrity. And beyond that, my emotional identity. So that's the bad news, that we have all this stuff going on. The good news is that we can take a step back. And in that moment, when we feel stressed out about something, when our crocodiles are roaring and maybe are so loud that we don't hear the owl anymore, we can ask ourselves a very simple question. Who's talking right now? Is it the owl, our wise self, or the crocodile? And when I'm not sure, I can be pretty sure that it's my crocodile, right? And the more often I ask myself that question, who's talking right now? The owl or the crocodile? I might start to notice that my crocodiles come in certain flavors that are sort of predictable, you could say. So that my crocodilian fears start to have some names, you could say, some things. And the more I name my crocodiles, the more I'm able to tame them because I start to have a handle on them. They have a less of a chance of overwhelming me. You know? Have you ever had a chance of a situation where you talked to somebody, you didn't know them, and once you got to know them better, it was easier to relate to them? The same thing happens with our consciousness. When we start to relate to our consciousness like a good friend, it starts to become less scary. Even those scary parts, even those crocodiles can become less scary. Now, how do we practice, you could say, familiarity, making friends with our crocodiles? Well, it helps to have a certain little map, right? And so in our work, we discovered 7 kinds of crocodilian fears. You could call them fear families that we can encounter over and over that are very common. You know, and they are related, as you'll see in a second, related to the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And so as we take a look at those, I'm going to do an internal poll on myself, which I do often. Like which of those 7 fear families might be active right now as I am facing my VUCA challenge, which in this case is having this challenging conversation with a colleague of mine. So here are the 7 fears families that we often see. The first one is related to Maslow's basic need, the need for survival. And so because I want to survive financially, physically, I'm going to be scared about scarcity, not having enough, for example. And then second level of Maslow, because I want to have good relationships, one key fear that springs up is the fear of abandonment. And then because I'm afraid of losing my sense of self-esteem, the third level of Maslow, I might develop a fear of failure. And then once I've gotten those basic levels done in Maslow, I get to this place of I want to explore the world. I want to know what all this is. And as I go into the world, I have to face my fear of uncertainty. And as I go into the world and start to face it, I want to sort of get this inner voice that says, you can make a contribution here. And if I want to make a contribution, I'm going to have to face my fear of hurting others and hurting myself, because as I interact with others and more deeply, I'm going to have more feedback, and that's going to be painful sometimes. People don't always like it, what I do or what you do. Don't do they? And then as I engage, I also start to notice that there's so much going on, and the complexity of it all might feel like an invitation for clarity, but also there's a fear of like, how will I put it all together? Like we see this in organizations, like the team seemed so predictable, the structure we had seemed so predictable. Now we're going to a matrix. Now my crocodile wants to get certainty and predictability and having it all figured out. So there's a fear of complexity that starts to play out. And then as I am in this journey of discovery, I'm also going to be interested in this person here and developing this depth which we've been talking about today. And as I do that, as I become interested in enlightenment, in wisdom and compassion, I may notice that some of my egoic personas no longer serve, like having to be nice or having to be the best one or the worst one or the shy one or etc. And I start to become afraid of like who I'm going to be without these identities. So the fear of the loss of identity starts to show up. So let's do a poll in a moment. But before I do that, let me share with you my fear that's most active right now when I think about this person that I need to give some feedback. I really like this person. And I'm afraid of hurting my relationship with this person. So I'm afraid of abandoning and of being abandoned. So that will be my fear. So let's do a poll right now. And in a moment you're going to see 7 radio buttons and click for your VUCA challenge, the one that I asked you to think about in the very beginning of this webinar. Think about which of those 7 fear families, is most active in me right now. And please cast your answers now. And as you do, I may keep talking a little bit. Don't worry too much about it being the perfect one. As we said in the very beginning, developing depth is a matter of practice. And simply putting our attention on these fear families already helps us gain consciousness and familiarity with us. So this act of pulling ourselves by itself is already helping us to tame our crocodiles by naming them. So take another few seconds or so to cast your votes. And then I'm very curious what you're all saying. What are some of the winning crocodile families today? So let's take a look at what you're saying. So I see that the fear of failure is number 1 with 36% of the votes, followed by the fear of uncertainty, the fear of hurt, losing identity, complexity, scarcity. So all of them got votes, but the fear of failure was the winner. And you know what? I often see that in this culture. And think about it. That makes so much sense, doesn't it? Because think about how we're all conditioned, how we fed our crocodiles throughout our lives, And this is becoming more and more intense, I think, in today's world. Like, how do you get ahead in school? It's not by failing or by asking the right question in most schools, but it's by saying, yes, I know the answer. And when we're failing, we fall behind. So that this fear of failure is not surprising that we have it. So the good news is that we can become aware of it. The bad news is that these things are kind of sticky, you could say. Now, I've been working with my fear of abandonment for the last, 30-some years. I'm 47 now, so I only became aware of it in my late teens, I think, in the most raw form. So notice your fear. You might be working with this, or you might have been working with this fear for quite a while. So the bad news is that these things are sticky, and driven by this fear of failure, for example, you might just be sort of think, well, this is just how it is. I should just give into it. And I know part of me wants to just be the nice guy, driven by my fear of abandonment. Driven by the fear of failure, you might be sort of induced, like hallucinated, induced into taking a shortcut, not taking the step back, not speaking up, not giving it your best, not daring to take a moment to do it a little differently to make sure we get to the right result. Now, the good news is we can be conscious of what happens when we do. Because when we give into our fear, life is a very good teacher. It actually tells us, hey, it's not working. Because when I give into my fear, I actually co-create what I fear the most. Problems cannot be resolved from the same level of consciousness that create the problem, right? So when I give into my fear of abandonment, I actually will play nice, but the person that I'm talking to will actually feel that I'm playing nice, and our relationship will go down anyway, so I'm actually abandoning myself and the other person. Same with the fear of failure. If I take shortcuts driven by my fear of failure, I'll be less effective producing failure, and therefore I've just created the result that I didn't want. Now that's the bad news, that the spiral keeps going down and down and down and down. And if we never stop this cycle, we might actually start to become convinced that life is this way, that I always fail because I just got another piece of news, another piece of evidence, know that I failed, or that relationships don't last, or that I will be abandoned, or that money is going to run out because I've just went another round on the merry-go-round of the crocodile, right? So ask yourself, when that happens, a very simple question. Who would I be without this fear? And keep it simple. The crocodile doesn't like simplicity because that exposes it. So with the sword of truth, ask yourself, what would happen if I think about my challenge without this fear? If I think about my challenge right now of giving feedback to this person without this fear of abandonment, I think I'll be truthful, calm, and not in a rush. And at the same time, there's a sense of maybe somewhat disorientation that takes place. So to help that, as I'm sort of creating some space, you could say, for the owl to come to the surface, I can do something with my mind to activate my owl. And one of the things I like to do to activate my owl is to ask myself, who do I admire? Who do I admire? And how would they approach this challenge? So one person that I admire, I'll tell you in a second, is Gene White. So ask yourself right now, who do you admire? Who do you admire? And what do they value? Well, I'll tell you a little bit about the person that I admire, Gene White. Gene White, until a few months ago, was the president of the Global Child Nutrition Foundation. She has more energy than most people I know. She has traveled for about 60 years all around the world, maybe 70 years all around the world, committed to this one purpose, helping to eradicate child hunger. And she has so much energy that when I'm with her, even when I'm thinking of her, I get more uplifted. Yeah. And Jean is in her mid-90s. What Jean teaches me is a deep sense of purposefulness. She's been true to her purpose for these 90-odd years. And at the same time, when you see her eyes, she's got this glimmer of curiosity. Her husband passed away a few years ago. And here's what she said. Isn't sadness just a way of adjusting to what happened? So Jean approaches everything in her life with this sense of unflinching curiosity and with the heart of discovery. So when I apply these values from Jean, purposefulness, the heart of discovery, curiosity, to this feedback conversation, it doesn't become something I have to slay, I have to get done immediately. It's something that I can approach with, you could say, a lot of depth. The beautiful thing about this practice of asking this question, who do I admire, is that it becomes a habit. And over time, I become the person that I admire. I become like that person that I admire. You could say, like Michelangelo was saying, when he was asked, how did you make this beautiful statue of David? He said, I saw an angel in the stone and I carved to set it free. So to me, leadership depth is all about freeing ourselves from our crocodilian reactivity and letting our owl wisdom, our owl beauty soar, come to the foreground so we can apply that. So in summary, how do we practice this? How do we increase leadership depth? There's a few questions that we can practice with, and to see every moment as a moment for practice. What is my challenge? What are the fears? Which of those fear families might be most active here? And how do I react under the influence of this fear? And how would I lead free from this fear, taking a step back? And then, how will I lead differently from my owl values? And thinking of somebody that I admire can help with that. Now I know that's a lot. To keep it simple, I always keep coming back to this one question, especially when I feel stressed and I think, like, geez, I think my crocodiles are having the day here. I can ask myself this simple question: who's talking now? Is it the owl or the crocodile? And when I'm not sure, I can be pretty sure it's the crocodile. Okay, enough said. Scott, let's hear what questions we have, whether from the owl or the crocodile, from the audience.
Yes, great questions came in. This is so interesting. I think a lot of people are struggling with their crocodile fears, you know.
I guess.
Really quickly,
Yes.
before we start, can you repeat again for the audience out there the acronym VUCA? What does this stand for?
VUCA means volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think people need to really hear what that is. So my first question comes from Bridget, and I think a lot of us are going to ask this. How do you unlearn fear? I mean, can you ever become completely free of it?
So, maybe we can get completely free from it. I think it's highly unlikely. So how do we get unglued from this fear? You could say, to me, it's like a friend. It's somebody that we learn to befriend, and to me, it's a practice of, I think, two things in essence. One, just becoming aware of it, so that we can take the step back, you know. And the other thing is to be very kind, because what the crocodile really doesn't like is love. That's very scary, right?
The crocodile doesn't like love.
No.
It scares the crocodile.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
vulnerability. It's
Right.
getting connected to people. So yeah, I think it's those two things: staying conscious and being aware.
Yeah. Jeremy asked a question on here about, I feel, and I agree with this. That's when this came in. I was thinking the same thing when I was listening to you, was these times of day that I have the crocodile comes around. For me, it's 3 a.m. in the morning,
Yes.
where every problem seems insurmountable. And I think a lot of people who are busy people, who have a lot going on in their lives, struggle with that, what I call that 3 a.m. spins.
Yes. Yes.
And it seems insurmountable, and the crocodile takes over.
Yes.
Tell us how we can get back to sleep.
Oh, thank you. So yeah, I get that 3 a.m. thing. So when I think about this, the trouble with the 3 a.m. thing is that it wants us to stay there, doesn't it?
Right.
Like it's like being in a hotel room and having a buzzing sound and somehow not finding the wherewithal to get up and turn off the air conditioner, right? That.
Right.
So to me, that's what we can do at 3 a.m. Sometimes when it gets very intense for me, I just sit up and meditate or breathe deeply for a little bit and ask myself this very simple question: who would I be without all this mental noise? For a moment, just give myself a little reprieve, like, who would I be without it?
Right.
And that by itself, like, perks me up, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I think, is a practice, and everybody has their own practices, but that works really well for me.
Right.
Just taking the decision, the choice to say, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Right.
I'm going to do something else. And at least imagining a possibility without it, that can help me.
Right. Yeah, because it's and then, you know, when I wake up, everything's fine. I know I can handle it. I can, deal with that issue and everything like that. But at 3 in the morning, I feel atrophied.
Yes.
So it's something active we must do. An active voice, maybe no, choice, to
Yes.
say to this crocodile, because it really is for me then. It's a mind and body experience, I'm feeling, because I am sleeping.
Yes.
So I feel very vulnerable, and I don't, so yeah. I think I'm just going on about this because I think a lot of people struggle with this out
I
there.
get it,
I hear a
yes.
lot of people who can't sleep, and that's a real problem. So
Yes,
thank you for
yes,
your
yes.
advice. All right, let me ask a question. People who are in more creative industries, Ben is asking, how can you use this technique to overcome fear when it comes to doing work that is more creative or singular, like writing?
Yeah, so crocodile also doesn't like to write only the same thing over and over, like or write what's expected, right? So to me, intentionality helps a lot. Like ask the owl from this deep silent place in myself, like, what is it that I really want to contribute to my creativity, through my writing? Like, what is it that I really intend? And sometimes it just helps me when it gets very busy to write down for this piece of writing, workshop, coaching, whatever it is, what would be my crocodilian intention? Just have fun with it. Well, like be the best and please these people and make sure I do it perfectly and everybody loves it. Okay, right. Well, like I sort of have gotten myself into a little corner there. Yeah. So I can see how that is not working. And then I ask with like great reverence, like, okay, this life is short. What am I here to do? Right. And that intentionality and then what's my intention for myself and the people that I want to serve with this?
Right.
And that helps me to get back to the creative stream.
Right.
The flow.
Right. What is my North Star? I bring this up in a lot of webinars. And what can I give? Right?
Yes.
Takes me out of myself. But somebody asked that. They said, how do you feel less self-conscious about yourself when you're speaking or out with others? Is it about that recalibrating yourself to giving?
Yeah. So others are so interesting, aren't they? Like that's why I almost became a monk, because I couldn't handle the others anymore, right? So if I think about it, like others are VUCA.
Right.
Like people have good moods, bad moods, and the crocodile takes it personally, tries to fix it,
Right.
tries to rescue. So the first thing that I ask myself, when I notice that I'm not in flow or feeling at ease with somebody, who's talking right now within me?
Right.
And what do I need to do for me to get back to center, get back to depth? Even if the person stands on their head and says that I'm an idiot, how would I still get back to that?
Right.
And then I relate from that place to the best possibility
Right.
that I can.
And one of the people, Taylor, said, I think crocodile does not like feeling awe and inspiration, right?
Yes.
And it's just, so that's that, it's sort of squashing your
Yes.
feelings of wonder.
Yes.
And one word you brought up that is so important to me, a phrase I heard that I think will really serve people well in communicating well or dealing with crocodile fears is replacing judgment with curiosity.
Yeah.
And judgment not in the holistic sense of the word. And that's really what you're saying, right?
Yes.
You've got to replace judgment with curiosity.
Yes.
Of a situation, of a person, of a feeling,
Yeah.
and be curious.
I love that, because you could say it's the crocodile spins story after story after story. And I can cut right through it by asking this question, with curiosity, is this absolutely true? And I know that no story, no thought is absolutely true, because they're all approximations of reality. So that's a very good home-based question for curiosity within myself.
Yeah. So we've got about 45 seconds left, and I just want to ask this final question here. I think this is important because people need practical, right? They want to start this, when we finish this webinar, they want to start. What do you believe, Carlos is asking, what do you believe is a good starting point to increase your leadership depth?
Okay. I would start always with this one question. And it's so simple, like, what do I want my life to be about? Like, what do I want it to be about? And then ask, what does my crocodile want it to be about? And start to map those out in our heads. And then, little by little, maybe small progress, big jumps, start to move towards what I really want my life to be about, from that place of wisdom.
Right. Tonight at 3 a.m. when I wake up, and I'm sure I will, I'm going to tell that crocodile, out, right? Get out of the room.
Or maybe with a little bit of kindness. I see you, little puppy dog, and I'm not going to spend the rest of the evening with you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Exactly. I'm going to invite the owl in, which is a night animal anyway, so it should be there.
That works.
Thank you so much. This was so interesting. It was great working with you.
Same here. It's an honor to work with you, Scott.
Thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today.